32nd summit of the African Union ended on Monday, February the 11th in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia's capital. There were topics of security, solidarity, and forced displacement forming key points of discussion. Another was deliberated on is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that seeks to create a single continental market for goods and services for member nations of the AU with free movement of businesses, persons and investments using a single currency. Well, members elected Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi as chairperson of the union, marking the end of Rwandan President Paul Kagame's one-year tenure.
All right, that's looking at our first topic of the day. We have in the studio the Director of Research and Advocacy at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Vincent Nwani. Good morning. It's good to have you join us. Thank you. You're welcome. And joining us on Skype from Kent in the UK is an economist, Akin Omishade. Akin, good morning. It's good to have you join us now. Okay, we'll get to hear him. Let's begin from the studio, Vincent. When it comes to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, Nigeria and just a handful of African countries have not signed that agreement, but over 49 out of the 55 African countries have signed. Nigeria not being on that page of those who signed, first of all, what does it mean for all of this?
At the last count, 50 countries have signed.
Okay, 50 now.
I think Ethiopia is the last country that put their signature on paper. Okay. I think we have about 4 countries left, and Nigeria is one of them.
One of the 4.
In the African continent, we have about 1.2 billion persons. Nigeria counting for a significant number, about 200 million. So Nigeria not being part of that picture means that a large part of African population is not yet
on board.
That is just the way we look at. We're going to look at that, and we've been on this discussion over the last 1 year of Nigeria signing and not signing. In fact, African continent have even moved beyond signing to ratification.
Exactly.
So far we have 17 countries that have ratified. I think if we get to 22, so we are looking for just 5 more countries to ratify, and it will be.
And then it becomes
so
effective.
the projection is that over the next 2 months, that this trade agreement, and that is the largest trade agreement in the world by coverage, country coverage, by population, even by size of transaction, expected transaction, and Nigeria will be left out of that over the next 2 months. That's the projection.
What's the potential for you now? What's the catch for you now in this agreement? By when it becomes implemented?
Well, the catch is that, to begin with, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry really connects itself or align with itself with some reservations why Nigeria have not signed. And the key reservation is that, are you sure this trade agreement will not make Nigeria a dumping ground, because we have large markets, we consume, and our domestic productive capacity, infrastructural challenges and shortcomings still remains with us. That is a major drawback. And the issue is that what safeguards are available to ensure that Nigeria doesn't end up losing out from this agreement and maybe killing our jobs and our struggling industry. That is the challenge. But that is the challenge. So we align ourselves. It is legitimate concern. But the issue is that the manufacturing sector of Nigeria will be mostly affected. And this sector contributes about 9 to 10% of GDP. And the meaning of that is that other sectors, the real estate, the services, our entertainment industry that have almost taken Africa, will receive a better light. So I think it's time we actually look at it again, that it looks like the benefit of signing this agreement and ratifying the protocols outweighs the concern, And for me, this is now my personal thought, that this agreement finally is going to be probably a wake-up call for Nigeria to really sit back and solve our institutional issues, regulatory issues, but majorly our infrastructural challenges that makes us uncompetitive, among Africa. And we've been talking about intra-African trade. You know, we've been talking about it. This trade agreement, again, brings it for us to actually walk our talk. Among Africans, countries within Africa, trade about 12% among themselves, intra-African trade. In other regions, the EU, about 32%. You know, in the Caribbeans and the North America, it's even it's even far more, up to 39–45%. So something needs to be done, and charity, they say, begins at home. I'm happy with some of the steps that the African Union is working on, because they recognize that it is not going to be that easy to let goods and services move freely, you know, break down the barriers. Human beings have to move freely, and capital also have to flow. It's a really ambitious plan.
I like you call it ambitious, because when you look at the makeup, the composition of Africa, you see that there are cultural issues, there are colonial issues, there are political issues that tend to become barriers here and there. The concept of language, the Francophone and the Anglophone countries, and even the other ones, Portuguese, it is a very strong factor. So when you're talking about single currency and you're talking about all of that, now, you acknowledged earlier on that about 1.2 billion population, or the market of Africa, Nigeria is a large chunk of that. So if goods are coming in, it seems that Nigeria is the first destination for all the goods coming in from all the European or Chinese or Asian or American countries and all of that. Nigeria, on the other hand, is looking at trying to safeguard its SMEs and manufacturing industry, infrastructure, and all of that. Is Africa really ready with all of the barriers and all of that? Is it really ready? Apart from looking at the beautiful paperwork of what the free trade agreement is and all of that, is Africa really ready for this?
We may never be ready. That's the truth. And sometimes some difficult things, you never get ready until it is get done. So I don't believe that Nigeria will ever be ready until we test it. Like I said before, that this will likely become a wake-up call that will make us to look at what will happen to our infrastructure. You know, and when this African free trade agreement actually begins, of course, the infrastructural deficit becomes a larger incentive for people to even solve, you know, bring in private capital if we get policies and regulations right. You know, when the world know that we actually want to deal with trade. So it's easy. Everybody wants to sell to Nigeria because you have the market and you have the character to consume. You know, but nobody say you shouldn't sell to other parts of the continent or other parts of the world. But the good news is that there is a very important clause in this agreement called the, I think, is it indigenous or local, you know, but I may not get the term correctly, but it explains that from any country in Africa that the goods is coming, that country must have 60% local value addition to that product or that services or goods. You know, that safeguards us.
And that will help produce what you consume, clarion call, which the government is selling to Nigeria. And
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That is just to protect Africans from influx of goods from Asia, China, Europe, and that will make us dumping ground. Because, true, we can't compete with Asians. Labor is cheap there. Capital is very cheap. Infrastructure well developed. So it's legitimate to really get worried about what happens to our auto industry, to our manufacturing industry, and who are even the operators in this industry, if we really want to analyze. What is the quality of jobs currently existing in this industry? What is the percentage of value addition or contribution to GDP? These are some of the things we need to look at. And we have been in different trade blocs before. ECOWAS have been with us since 1975, if I'm correct. I can tell you for free, 16 member countries in ECOWAS, Nigeria is the greatest beneficiary of ECOWAS free trade agreement. In fact,
and
for
also
instance,
the greatest contributor too.
Exactly. You can look at the data. Ghana, the total trade volume of Ghana, you know, that's the import of Ghana. 90% flows in from Nigeria to Ghana, you know. So these are good news, and if we can replicate the success,
okay, widen it,
or you know, widen what we have done with ECOWAS 16 countries and widen it to the remaining 44 countries or 43 countries, good for us. And the starting point is to ensure that we remove local barriers. And, you know, there is also a level of domesticating the AFTA agreement in your own country. And domesticating it means that you are standardization, quality control, you know, all of this, you need to really look at that. And
all right, from this standpoint where we are right now, we are where we are already. So what steps should be considered before the signing by the president?
I believe that all the steps that needed to be considered by the president have been considered. Of course, the president walked back and said, okay, form a committee headed by the trade office, you know, for private sector to actually speak, you know, analyze. You know, a lot of studies have been done and recommendations. And the recommendation is that, yes, there are concerns, but the benefits outweighs the disadvantage, and we can start by signing. And not that immediately we sign, see, Nigeria don't even have, we're only buying time. The truth is that we don't have option. This agreement will be signed by Nigeria. Let's see, election is this weekend. After the election, let's see what happens. But I'm very sure that we're going to sign.
Let's compare notes now of your analysis with an economist now who is joining us from Kent in the UK, Akinomi Shade. We appreciate your sticking on now. We had hitches earlier on with the audio, but all seems fine from your end. Talking about this Africa Free Trade Agreement now, well, there seems to be a seeming reluctance. So how are you viewing the fact that we haven't even gotten up to the 22 benchmark of countries to ratify to this agreement? What's your analysis?
Well, thank you. Yes, we have some that technology failed us, and I believe that you can hear me loud and clear now. Well, don't forget that Nigeria is not the only country that has not ratified or signed up to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And there are so many reasons for that. If you look at it, the agreement itself is history-making. And unfortunately, Nigeria has not been part of that history-making. And there are many reasons. Some of them are valid, some of them personally and from an economical, social perspective, they are not. One, the main group of advocates against Nigeria signing the Continental Free Trade Agreement is the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, which is a protectionist attitude. We do not want other countries or third-party countries to come into Nigeria and infiltrate our market. But the question now is, do we actually have that production market in existence in Nigeria? The empirical answer is no. We are a country that consumes, we do not produce as much as to compete. If you look at the statistics, trade within Africa to other parts of the world is near 16%. Trade within Europe is 51%. But then, if you look at even in Asia, it is about 52%. What we need to overcome in Nigeria and in Africa in general is that why is there no trade? The reason is the products we export from Africa are raw products. What we are importing are finished products. So there is a disconnect between the raw and the finished. And the reason why there is a disconnect is because the manufacturing and the production systems are not in place. Why this agreement will be challenging is because Nigeria is saying we need to understand and appreciate the state of origin. Once Nigeria is able to overcome that state of origin debacle, Nigeria will sign up because of the market. Nigeria is the biggest export and import market for most of these African countries. But then, you import raw materials. What are you turning those raw materials into? Nigeria exports flour. Nigeria exports palm oil. But it goes through to Malaysia and we buy it back as finished product. Why is it not going to South Africa? Why is it not going to the Democratic Republic of Congo? Because there's no manufacturing. Why is iron not coming into Nigeria or steel coming into Nigeria? Why is it going to China and we are still buying iron rods? So you can see the disconnect. And the the fear of other countries taking over or infiltrating our market is a bit misplaced. And then if you take it further, if you look at even within the EPA, the West African bloc, Nigeria didn't sign up to the agreement with the European Union, the European Partnership Agreement. Nigeria did not sign up to it. And then if you look at it, the African Fair Deal trade, whereby cocoa is exported from Africa because European buyers are buying at better rates, which Nigeria has still not signed up to it. Just like what is happening in England, in the United Kingdom and the EU, Brexit, no country is an island. We need that community of economic nations to carry out this assignment.
All right. Now, before let me still stay with you, Akin. There's also the sentiments that this agreement did not originate from Africa. It's not owned by Africans. It seemed to be forced down the throat of African countries, and that seemed to make some countries to be a little skeptical or pessimistic about ratifying the agreement. What do you think?
Well, it might not have originated from Africa, but then if you look at it, the balance of trade itself is skewed against African countries. Now, who are the thought leaders of the agreement? The UNHCHD, the UN, the IMF, because there's a recognition that Africa needs to do more for itself. Whether the thought has come from Europe or from the Americas, what are the African leaders? What are the African economies doing about it? So I would be advocating against that thinking. The challenge has been forced on us to rethink and re-engineer our economy. So why don't we take it and run with it? Why are African leaders not saying, okay, we've been challenged, we can trade amongst ourselves. We have the biggest market. Africa is still on top. We have the biggest market in the world. We have the human and natural resources. So many natural resources that are yet on tap. Why don't we say, okay, let us trade amongst ourselves? Why can't we trade amongst ourselves?
Okay,
that's the question.
All right, Akin Omishade, economist, thank you very much for joining us. Now, the final word now, just in few seconds. What do you think going forward? What scenarios can play out going forward concerning this agreement and Nigeria?
Like I said before, Nigeria will sign very soon. Let's watch out after the election because we've done all the groundwork. And the protectionist groups are saying, okay, now we understand that the benefits
would also, right, even for them.
Yeah, and we cannot be left as island in Africa. Right. Nigeria must lead by example.
And the right consultations have been made.
Exactly. But the final word from me is that charity must begin
at home.
We need to clean up our ports. If we're going to export or import, our port must work. All right. And it's not working right now.
Okay. Dr. Vincent Wani of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we also thank Akin Omishade, who joined us from Kent in the UK.